This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 95. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, welcome back, CBT School family. I am so happy to be here with you today. It is a beautiful sunny afternoon here in Southern California, and I had the honor of yesterday being at and presenting at the Southern California affiliate IOCDF conference. So it was a conference for people and family members who have OCD, and it was a beautiful, beautiful event. I was so happy to get to meet some of you. And I have to say, I have a new favorite thing in the world, and that is when I go to an event and somebody or multiple people come up and say, Kimberly, and they give me a big hug as if we've been longtime friends. And it's so wonderful to get to connect with you guys in person, not over the microphone. So please just do that. If you're ever at an event and you know I will be there, come up and say hello. It is my new favorite thing in the whole wide world. So that being said, I've got one quick announcement to make, and that is that there is an upcoming event, but it is a digital event, and it is OCD Construct. This is an online conference that is so cool. It is absolutely free. And what it will be is I will be there presenting. John Hirschfield will be presenting. Natalie Maragoni, who's been on the podcast, will be presenting. Dr. Phillipson will be presenting, plus many more. I'm so excited. This event is free. Let me say it again. It's free education for you guys. If you have OCD or no one who has OCD, please let them know. Go over to ocdconstruct.com and you can sign up for free. And we love free things because they're free, and free is awesome, right? All right, today I have an incredible interview to share with you. And this one's actually super meaningful for me because I have with us Catherine DeMonte. She is a therapist who actually works very close to my office, and she was the person who led me to create CBT School. And for that, I am forever grateful to her for helping me get the courage and lead me towards facing my fears and going towards my dreams, doing something I really value. And she had a group and I joined it. It was a women's group and I found it to be so wonderful. And I asked her to come on to talk to you guys about some of the tools that she taught me and that was so helpful for me. So I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. She's just a beautiful soul, really. That's the best way to explain Catherine. She's just such a beautiful soul, and she talks about how to lead a life based on love and not fear. She talks about how to really be a receiver of love in your life, and I just cannot wait to share this episode with you. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to share it with you right now so that you can take in all those amazing lessons. Please know before we move on that I do love you guys. I am sending you great amounts of virtual hugs and love, and please keep doing the brave things. I just, as I always say, I'm so proud of you guys. I'm so grateful that I have you guys in my life to celebrate us all coming together and doing the hard thing. So have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be probably one of the most personal podcasts for me that we've done so far because I have somebody so special to talk with you all about some of the tools that I have learnt from Catherine DeMonte, who we have here today. And she's going to share with you these amazing tools. And then I will also share why they're so important to me. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with you.
I know. I was just telling Catherine, for the listeners, that I might probably cry during this episode, which is totally fine, just because I already feel such emotion showing up in my body. So let's just do it, shall we?
All right. Yes, do it.
So I know I've already going to be introducing in the introduction here about the beautiful work that you're doing, but I also want to share that these were tools that I learned from you in an abundance circle. Do you want to just quickly share what that means and what that was so that people have context for where I learned these tools?
Sure. The abundance circles I created as part of my private practice are small groups that meet every other week for 8 sessions. And a new tool is introduced each time that has to do with both our inner and our outer work. The inner work like our blocks and our limiting stories and our shadow work, which was one of the tools, was a big one. And our outer work too, the work we put behind any action. So that we can create whatever it is we want. And they are very small and intimate, and the women grow very close in them and are very supportive and have shifted lives, and people have called in exactly what they said on that very first day it was they wanted more of in their life.
Right. I think it's important to mention that cbtschool.com is a product of your abundance circle.
Yes.
That's very important to mention.
Yes.
Right.
I was thinking of that very thing just last night. I was thinking that it was birthed, like so many other projects, were from the Abundance Circle. When you came in, you weren't quite sure what you wanted to work on. And then that showed up and you dove right in and you did the work to make it happen. And you showed tenacity and looked at...
Right. It's so funny. I'll tell everybody before we get started, because you guys will crack up at this, is I showed up and I was like, everyone was like, I know what I want to do. And I was like, I don't have a clue what I want to do. I don't even know what I want. Like, I couldn't even get that far. So yeah, I think that everyone, and within a couple of weeks of the group, CBT School was born and it all went from there. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure, because now that's in the world and you're healing so many people and bringing your own gifts out more. So I'm really delighted about that.
Thank you. So, okay, let's go, because I know everyone's now very curious to know what's going on here. Tell me about the tool that you introduced pretty early on, which was love versus fear.
Yes, I love that one. I think that's a really beautiful one. So love versus fear is the tool that addresses that. Those are the two main categories of feeling that we have. That the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And every other emotion or feeling comes underneath one or the other of those. So, for example, under love, you might find peace and serenity and forgiveness, calm, patience. And under fear, you would have anxiety, frustration, depression, things like that. And so one of the reasons I love that tool so much is because when we know of it, when we know we have a choice to stand in one or the other, we're actually coming home to who we came in as. Because babies come packaged right for life, don't they? And one of the things they hold so beautifully is that they are bundles of love. You don't see a fearful baby. And the only time or the only reason a baby would be fearful is something shows up on the outside. But we're not packaged that way internally.
Right.
However, fear comes in to protect us, because as we grow up, we may not get all of our needs met, or we may have scary things happen. We could move a lot maybe as a child and not feel secure, or we can have parents that fight, or we can be bullied. And so fear shows up in those moments and gets locked into our body. So when something similar shows up, it can surge again. So fear isn't really bad. It gets a bad rap, but it's there to protect us. And it says to us kind of in essence, remember that time that other thing happened? Well, you don't want that scary thing to happen again now, do you? So maybe you should just play small, or maybe you shouldn't show up as big in the world, or maybe you shouldn't do that thing because that could be really scary. But then love comes in if we remember to go back to it and says, what would love have me do? That's how I ask it anyway, when I'm sort of teetering on the two. I feel afraid of doing something, but my heart and my soul are longing to do this other thing. I check in to see which one's accurate. And what I feel into is what would love have me do? And I get the right answer.
Mm-hmm. And when I talk with clients about this idea of, tapping into love or leading with love or making decisions based on love, they sometimes struggle with, because they've tapped into fear or they've listened to fear so much, they struggle with that. So what do you encourage people to do when they are so not yet friends with that process? What would you encourage them to do?
Such a beautiful way to ask it. Not yet friends with the process. I like that. That's exactly the energy. The way you ask that is exactly the energy I would suggest taking to addressing the very thing you asked, which is I like thinking of the little girl inside of us, the little girl inside of me, when something scary is showing up in my life. And so you can do that by visualizing yourself. And I often suggest to people they put a picture of themselves as a child in a frame in their house where they see it every day. And how would they speak to that sweet little person is how I would like them to speak to themselves. And you can also put a hand on your heart and maybe one on your stomach and just listen to the fear rather than pushing it down, which makes it grow, or scolding it, like saying, I shouldn't feel this way, or giving into it, like, you're right, it's going to be awful. None of those things work. But making friends with it looks something like, what is it you want me to know? I'm listening. I even like saying that when I have my hand here. I just say, I'm listening, and I get still. You could also journal about it and ask it to speak. And a really good technique for finding out what's really deeply beneath it, not just on the surface, is to do non-dominant handwriting. So you can write with your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you would write with your right hand, what is it you want me to know? And then with your left hand, if that's your non-dominant hand, you answer. And what that does is cross wires in our brain because you're crossing hands. And so that crosses the one that's been dominant. And so you're actually uncovering deeply unconscious material. And what comes up when my clients do that is just so incredible, so impressive.
Right.
So you have them write from that and ask what fear wants you to know.
Right. And I remember when I did that, the fact that the writing was so messy actually helped me connect with that little girl, because that's kind of how my little girl would have probably written it too.
Yes, I think that's so true. I love that piece about it, that it looks like a child's writing and it's also arduous, like it was when we were little. We forget how that used to be hard.
Right.
And now we do it effortlessly. But there's something about coming back to that place that also, you're so right, that also makes it help us connect to when we were a child.
Right. I love it. I feel like this is a perfect segue into the tool that I talk about this a lot, and it was so meaningful to me, which is this tool around receiving.
Yes, I really like that one too. And it's really an important one because we women especially have difficulty receiving, which is ironic because that's actually the archetype of the female or the woman, is to receive. The archetype is a chalice, which gets filled up. And when you think about and that's not a gender stereotype, it's an archetype, which is different. So the receiving becomes so important, or we're giving from an empty cup. And if you think of our body and our soul, our body, we receive sexually, and we receive a baby when we're into our womb, when we're pregnant. So we're made to receive. And we're actually in a place historically where we're doing the opposite. We're rejecting. We feel like we need to compete with men who are providing and provide equally, and then give more elsewhere besides the providing. We say no thank you to help. We reject compliments very easily. We actually deflect them immediately. We feel we either have to give it one right back, or we feel like they may want something, so it's suspect. Like, what do they want from me if they're giving me a compliment? Or, like I said, we have to give one right back instead of just soaking that in. That would be one way of receiving. We don't even receive compliments. Like if somebody says, I love what you've done with your hair today, we tend to say, oh, I was just going to get it cut, or I like your top. this whole thing. So we need to just receive it and let it in. My grown son, who's very much a gentleman, tells me that when he is, let's say he's ahead of somebody and he's entering a building like a bank or something and sees that there's somebody behind, he will stand there for a bit and leave the door open for them to walk through, which is something somebody could receive, right? That act of kindness. But he said more often than not, people not only don't say thank you, they walk past him without acknowledging him. So they definitely don't say thank you. And I believe that that's born from a belief, I don't need you to do that for me, so I'm not going to even thank you for it, instead of receiving it as an act of kindness. And so we can learn to receive that way. We can learn to receive. One of the ways I like to receive is, and it's a fun way, is if I see coins on the ground, I pick them up and then I say, this is a benevolent universe. Because I feel like it showered me with it. So I like to receive that way. I like to try to say thank you and just receive a compliment. You can also use the word receive where you would normally say get. Like, I'm going to receive a massage today. I'm going to receive help here. I once was reading a blog and the topic was receiving. And the woman who wrote about receiving said sometimes at night her husband would come home and would talk about his day. And it would be one-sided and quite long and sometimes pretty negative. And it was all she could do to hear it. And she said to herself, I'm just here to receive his story silently. And that shifted it for her. So it's a way of giving. We think that we have to give so much, and we've even been taught it's better to give than receive. But actually, we're coming from, like I said, an empty cup if we only give. And I like thinking of it like the tide. We have to have both. Mm-hmm. We can't come from an empty cup. And when we don't receive, we get very resentful. Right. We think, how come I have to do everything? But we haven't asked for help.
Right. And I think that's a piece of it. For me, the reason that it resonated for me so much is I think that I thought as a woman that I was actually supposed to be the giver. You know what I mean? So I think it was actually something I'd learned early on that, or that I was strong if I was not the receiver, that I was strong if I was the giver. And so I think that's why that when I really learn about the balance, I think that was really helpful for me, because I had to break through this idea that you're not strong just because you give all day, right?
Right.
And you're not weak if you receive.
Right.
And to just make it as something that you balance out, I think was a shift that really was strong for me.
I can imagine. In the book that's coming out that I wrote about these tools, it's called Beep, Beep, Get Out of My Way, 7 Tools for Living Your Unstoppable Life. There's a story in there that somebody shared with me of her home and her car and her cat and everything in her home being destroyed in a devastating fire. She lost literally everything. And one of the gifts she said that came from losing everything was learning how to receive. She had never learned how to do that before, and it shifted her life around. And it was so powerful to read that. It was so humbling to think that that's, like when we're buckled like that and brought to our knees, that's something that can come out of the ashes, literally.
Right.
And as you said, it's just like breath or tide. We would not survive if we only exhaled, right? We have to inhale. So if we think of inhale as the receiving piece, it can make all the difference. And we can give ourselves permission to do it.
Right.
And the being strong piece, by the way, is, how you said you used to think that it was weak to receive. I think that's why sometimes people walk past my son when he's holding the door. I think they think, if I acknowledge that you did something for me, that makes me weak or indebted. That's another reason we don't want to receive. It's like, I don't want to have to give back.
Right. Or it's a vulnerable moment. And I think that's why these two tools go so hand in hand, is to receive, you have to have a degree of trust and love, right? You have to be open to love and being cared for. And if you're coming from a place where you've always just come from fear, like fear is about scarcity and fear is about avoiding whatever thing. So you can see there that those two really play into each other so much.
Yeah, they really do. I agree with that. I hadn't thought about that before, but I like it. I do like how the tools sort of blend so effortlessly one to the next and really build on each other. But I hadn't thought of those two in particular being such a good fit.
Right. And I'll just mention one other thing, which I have one client in particular who really resonated with receiving. And she had said, it's the receiving is in the pause.
Oh,
it's in the pause.
I like that.
Because I think too, sometimes might even, some people might be listening, might think, no, I receive a massage, or I receive people to open the door. But then it's in that pause where you actually walk through the door and allow that receiving to really, like that pause. I think that was a really insightful catch, I thought, because I think we can be like walking really fast and be like, yep, I received. But it's about that slowing down, and that's where I think love seeps in.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, that's so beautifully said. Yeah. If you don't pause, I really like that, by the way. If you don't pause, I don't know how you could let it in. I like thinking of it as going, yummy, and just, like, it's when it's an unexpected thing and you're not thinking, how do I give back right away? Or how, but just, in fact, I often use as the example, speaking of pausing, when we get a compliment and flip it or even make it negative, we've actually rejected the gift they've just handed us like that, haven't we? And so I often instruct people to please just try to remember to say, oh, thank you, period. Just thank you. And it's so hard for some women.
Yeah, I love it. I do. I think it's so powerful. So we've talked about love versus fear, and then we've talked about receiving that love. What do you think about receiving anxiety as well? Because a piece, when I talk with clients about, we're always talking about doing the hard thing, or it's a beautiful day to do hard thing. Often clients will go, but I don't understand, because then I'm going to feel lots of anxiety. But I think that receiving is a huge piece of also receiving anxiety, like you talked about before. Is that something that you talk about in terms of greeting and receiving the presence of fear?
Yes, absolutely. So I think when we acknowledge fear is showing up, that creates a pause, as opposed to believing the feeling. I like to say, question the thought. Don't be a questioner of the thought rather than a believer. And anxiety shows up when we believe the feeling, as opposed to taking that pause and questioning, is it true? Is the outcome I'm expecting to be true? So an example of that might be when you're ordering a pizza from a pizzeria. After you've ordered it, then jump in your car, drive to the pizzeria, make sure they make it right, make sure they put it in the right size box, make sure that the address they put in your GPS is the correct one, then follow the guy home to make sure he got it right. Correct?
Right.
That would be awful. And imagine that we do that all the time in every decision we make, and that creates anxiety. Right? So one of the other tools is deep desire plus work. And in that, you have to do your work, and then you have to find a place of letting it go. You trust it's on its way. So how these tools relate to anxiety would be putting out what you want, working, getting crystal clear on what it is you want more of. And it can be a relationship. It could be a program like the one you created. It could be more financial gain, or it can be peace. It could be any of those things. And a part of that is getting really crystal clear on it, and then doing the work to make it happen. And then you could let go of it. You let go of the how. And that helps with anxiety. Mm-hmm. So if one of the hard things one does all day is question their thoughts and become an observer of it rather than a believer, that's one of the things that can be really helpful for that, for anxiety. Also, reframing our perspective can help with anxiety. So another scenario, let's imagine that you've worked a really hard day all day, and then you look at the clock and you go, it's 5 o'clock, I've got to get on the freeway, and I still have to pick up Johnny at school, and then we have to make dinner. Oh my God, what a grind. So that's one perspective. Let's say the exact same thing happens. It's 5 o'clock, you look at the clock and see it's time to go, and you say, and now I get to get my boy. He owns my heart. And then we're going to eat dinner together, and I'm so grateful for the food we have in our refrigerator. So the change in perspective came from gratitude. So gratitude can actually help with anxiety, because when the focus is on what we have and not what bad things can happen or what will probably happen, then that can really help with anxiety as well.
Right. Okay. So you actually tapped on something that I talk a lot about. I used to frame it in a different way before I met you, but then you put it in the words you use, which I love, which is deep desire, right? So tell me about deep desire, because, so let's just be real, facing fears, like for everybody who's out there, facing your fears every day is really, really hard. Right?
Yeah.
And in a normal sense, what I hear so often is like, why would I want to do that? Right? Why would I want to do the hard thing? And I get it, but we know it works, right? But what I love is you talking about needing to have deep desire and do the hard work. Can you share your thoughts about that?
Sure. So in the deep desire phase, you want to really allow the feeling to come up, whether it's anxiety or if the focus is on the thing you want to attract. So it can work in either direction.
I think a part of it for me that I know a lot of my clients talk about is when you're going through and you're making a plan and you're moving towards it. Let's even say you're midway in the plan. You do need to know what it is you're working towards, because if you don't have a clear picture of what you're working towards, midway when it gets really hard, you're like, I don't want to do this. This is hard. You know what I mean?
Yes, understandably. Right. And who can blame the person, right? But if you do the work piece, I think that helps with the place in the middle where you get nervous. So because you're applying energy toward it. So that could look like putting up a vision board, which is actually, instead of work, I would like to call that play, because it can be so fun. You can do it with friends. And if not being anxious, but being in a place of peace more often is your goal, you could put images of what that would look like for you on your board. Right. And then journaling, like how you were able to do one hard thing today. If you journal about that, that makes it more concrete as well. Doing something outside of your comfort zone would be in the work category. Reaching out for help is in that category as well. And that could be therapy, or it could be if you're anxious about like going out for an audition or a new job, but you reach out to somebody anyway, or help with a project, and you call somebody that's in the field, like an influencer, that would be good for you to know, but you reach out anyway. All of those, I think, combat your anxiety because you've actually taken steps. But if you're not taking steps and it's free floating, that anxiety is free floating, and you're not doing anything about it, I believe that makes it grow.
So good. All right. So I know you've already spoke briefly on gratitude, and I really wanted to pause and really bring that in as the final tool that you discussed, because it was so important to me. Can you share with us a little bit about the tool of grace and gratitude?
Yes, I would be happy to. I really love that one. It's the 8 tools. It's the last one. And I love how it ties up all the others like with a ribbon. It's just beautiful, I think. So I believe anything can be reframed in life from the perspective of gratitude. We can always find the gift in something and look for the gift in it and the lesson in it versus why did this happen to me, kind of a stance. And maybe a brief description of what grace is would be important, because we don't really use that word that much anymore. But to me, grace is the thing that shows up in life that rescues us out of difficult situations when we weren't expecting it. It's a reminder that this is actually a benevolent place that we live in, and that there's help when we ask to receive it. And so that to me is what grace is. And so finding grace in the everyday is part of the grace and gratitude tool. And then the gratitude piece is, like I said, remembering to find the gift in all the things. And some of the gifts are wrapped in sandpaper, I realize. There's some things are rough, and there are beautiful lessons in it. And sometimes we're buckled to our knees, like the woman I mentioned earlier who lost everything in a fire and still found the gift through it. So when we come from gratitude, I notice that shifts our energy, which shifts what comes into us. And for people who struggle with anxiety and try to work through that every day, coming from gratitude can be really helpful, because instead of worrying about the how or this bad thing will happen, if we can hop our brain over to gratitude as often as possible, that can help alleviate some anxiety.
And depression too, right? Like it's so important. Or even not, like even for just every human.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned depression, because it's a very good antidote to depression, because depression is about lack and not having and there not being enough or things are bad. And gratitude brings up joy, and there is enough, and I'm grateful for what's here. And that really can lift depression. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the thing that was so fascinating for me was I knew about gratitude. I'm a therapist. Gratitude is like written on every pillow in every department store. You know what I mean? And so it's everywhere. But I think it's sometimes I still naturally default to, like, sometimes I just will notice the lacking, right? And so the gratitude thing is a really helpful thing to keep reminding me of, like, okay, only a few weeks ago, I totally like cut my finger open, right? Like you could see my bone. It was disgusting.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
But the interesting thing is I kept going, I can't believe I've never done this yet. Like, how interesting.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was this interesting.
Yeah, like a study.
There was this interesting gratitude of going, wow, I've gotten through over 3 decades, not yet having opened my skin to this degree. So it was just,
I love that.
I was shocked, actually, because my first reaction was like, why me? This is terrible. Now I have to go to the doctor. So I think that there's that gratitude piece of, you can even apply it, like you said, to when things are really prickly, right?
Yes. And maybe especially we should then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love it. I really, really do. And let me also come back. Let's circle back really quick, because I think that I've missed a really important point, is talk about how deep desire plays out related to depression as well, right? So 80% of people who have anxiety also have some depression. What would that look like, the deep desire piece, in when you feel stripped of desire? You remember me like coming in going, I don't know what I want. You know what I mean? So that talk a little bit about finding desire if you haven't got it.
Yes, that's a really good point. What you did when you didn't know what it was you wanted was exactly what one ought to do. And I learned from watching you do that. And that was, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to put things out. And kind of like there was this invisible metaphoric table in front of you. And it's like, it could be this. I don't know if it's that. And then we could all see it. We could all see it with you, like, maybe it is this, and you could see it. And so playing with what it might be is a good way to start with getting clear on your deep desire too. So getting, like, I don't know what it is, but it kind of has this feel, or I know that what I want is relationship, but I don't know what the person will look like or be, or I know I need more financial abundance, or I know I want to get out of this funk I'm in, whatever it is, just start laying it out like that and getting more crystal clear. Then as it gets a little bit more clear, start stepping out of your comfort zone to bring it in. That the working toward it can help with depression too. It's when we're sitting with it and not knowing. And as you step out of your comfort zone, you're going to bump into people asking questions or offering help that will support you, which also helps alleviate depression. Or they might say, you know who you should talk to is, and that it gets it rolling. And then as you get more clear, that becomes the new track that your mind is focused on. And we know that what the mind focuses on shows up in how we feel.
Right.
And so if it's no longer an ambivalent, nebulous thing, but like getting clear on this thing that lights you up, and you're talking to people about it, making it real in the world, that's the work piece of the deep desire. So that can really help with depression.
Right.
Anxiety.
And what I was thinking as you were talking too is it's a somewhat of a curious action. Like you said, deep desire and hard work. And for me, it was, the hard work was actually being curious, right? Being, instead of being like, no, not doing, like, it's not that, it's definitely not that. No, it's definitely not that. It was that curiosity of going, I wonder how that might feel. Let's be curious, right?
Yes. Yeah, we can play with it. So the work doesn't really have to be hard. It's tenacious, and there's a stick-to-itiveness to the work. But remember, the work piece was also inner work. So it's not just the going out. So playing with it would be in the inner work, looking at your thoughts, observing your thoughts and not judging them. Like if we are in that phase of playing with it a bit and we judge that we're not further along or that we don't know what it is, I should be past this by now. That's so judgmental. And we wouldn't say that to somebody else. who was on path trying to find out what they wanted to do, right? So if we can, in that phase, just sort of notice that I'm kind of judging that. Good to know. That shows me where my work is, my inner work.
Right.
And then get back to getting clear on the deep desire that you want to call in. And deep desire could be, I want more peace. I want less anxiety. I want more calm in my life. And so we can play with that as well. Like, what would that look like? I don't even know yet. Maybe it's a house on the lake. Maybe it's more vacation. Maybe it's reading in bed. Like just start playing with it.
Right. I love it. Oh, I'm so grateful we got to chat. I got through the whole thing without crying. That was pretty good. Not that I was trying not to. It just, I got totally excited. So that was really wonderful.
That's lovely. I'm really glad we had this too.
Yeah. Catherine, tell us where people can hear more about you.
I'm a psychotherapist in Calabasas, and I have a website at www.catherinedemonte.com. Catherine's with a C. And I have abundance circles that meet there often. And I have a book coming out based on those abundance tools, as I mentioned, that comes out in June. And I'm on Instagram as Catherine DeMonte and Facebook as well.
Great. And I'll link all of those to the show notes so people can go directly to them. Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy we got to do this together.
Oh, thank you. I am too. I enjoyed it so much. It's always delightful to see you.
You too.
Thank you.
Please note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.